All right, here he is.
Sean, so you got a big role in Till, and I want to go back to a couple weeks ago when the trailer was first released. And a lot of Black people, especially on Twitter, were like, no, I'm never going to see this. I don't want to be traumatized. Why are they even making this?
Yeah.
And I wonder, from somebody who worked on this piece and is part of it, what is your response? What was your response to that immediate backlash from people who hadn't even seen the film?
I know. It was crazy. My first response is there's no actual physical violence visited upon this child in the movie, like none. It's suggested, obviously, you know what happened. We see and hear, certain images or hear certain sounds that let you know what's going on, but there's no actual physical violence being inflicted on him in this film. And that's the first thing. And then the second thing is that the movie's not even really about the literal visceral things that happened to him. It's about what Mamie Till Mobley did after the fact to draw attention to it and just get the whole world on notice that this is what's going on and to get some justice for her son. So it's really more so a story about a mother's devotion to her son. It's a love story between a mother and a son and her refusal to let his death go without having any meaning.
And I appreciate that focus because we all talk about Emmett Till and his name rings very loudly in the Black community and in American history. But Mamie is the true hero of this story. There were other Emmett Tills, surely.
That's right.
And I respect the mother's and father's decision to close the casket, and this is very hurtful, and we need to mourn in private. And I deeply respect Mamie's decision and her courage to say, no, let them see.
Right. It's really about what is a shocking and incredibly brave decision that she made, because there's been debates recently about like stuff that went on in Uvalde and the caliber of the bullets that they were using and how they were tearing these bodies apart. And should people see what that is so that they would be more motivated to act on gun control, for example. And so, and those families chose not to do that. And I totally respect that. And I don't know that I would do any different. But the point is that it takes a lot of guts and a huge amount of vision and heroism to allow your child in their brokenness to be exposed to the entire world.
I think Americans in general are coddled and protected from violent images that allow us to have a paralyzed gun conversation, that allow us to be this militaristic global power, because we never see like what is the result of the drones, of the killing, of the shootings. And I think if we saw those things, we would have an entirely different relationship. Of
course. And ironically, I find that at least the American viewing public, they have this weird queasy thing with sexual images, but violence, that's just fine. That's great. It's kind of like a weird kind of double standard,
my friend Keith Beauchamp is a big producer on this. He's the premier Emmett Till scholar, historian in the country. I wonder what you learned from him and just him being around and the insight that you were able to get into why Mamie made the choices that she did.
Well, Keith was just the single biggest help to me in what I had to do in this film, because he knew Mamie Till Mobley. He knew the character that I played, Gene Mobley. He knew them personally. He spent a lot of time with them. And so he was really like my chief resource of like the nuts and bolts and the kind of like the unspoken private things that go on between a couple. Like he knew about those things between those two. And so he was a huge help to me. We talked for hours about how they were together and how the relationship really functioned and how Gene really treated Mamie. And so I could not have done what I did in this film without Keith and all of the knowledge that he was able to pour into me. No, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, continue. Go ahead.
Well, you play Gene Mobley.
Yes.
Emmett's stepfather. Right?
Yes. Surrogate father. He was engaged to be married to Mamie at the time that he was killed. At the time that Emmett was killed. So he was kind of a surrogate father. Like, he taught him how to drive and took him to baseball games and stuff like that. So he really was, at the time of Emmett's death, the closest thing Emmett had to a father.
So tell us about him, because this story always revolves around Emmett and Mamie, as it should, but you're playing Gene.
Right.
So who is he, and what impact does he have on Emmett and on Mamie? Is he part of the conversation of, we should open this casket up?
Well, it's hard to say for sure. I do know, like, as we depicted in the film, he's not 100% on board at first, you know? I think that it takes so much courage and so much kind of foresight to make that decision. I don't think Gene at the time had that courage and foresight that Mamie had. And so, you know, from reading Mamie's autobiography, The Death of Innocence, you get the sense that she was kind of alone in her family at first in terms of taking on this challenge. Because I think her own mother and her own father and Gene, all of them are kind of like, are you sure you want to do this? You know? But the thing about Gene is, I think more so than anybody else, is that as soon as Mamie makes a decision, he's on board. He's 100% supportive, 100% devoted to Mamie and whatever she needed from him.
It's interesting to see a Till film that doesn't give us the violence, right? And I mean, that's a huge part of this. I haven't had a chance to see the film yet, but I'm interested in, because there's folks who are like, I don't want to see that, and I respect that. But then there's folks who are like, how can you tell the story without showing what they actually did to him? Because this was cruel and unusual. So how do we balance that?
Well, the thing is that you have to take into account the context of the times that we're living in. You know, we've sat here for the last few years and we've watched Ahmaud Arbery get slaughtered. We've watched George Floyd get slaughtered. You know, we know what happened to Trayvon Martin. I think in the last 8, 10, 12 years, we've just been bombarded with it over and over and over and over and over again as Black people. And I understand that we've had enough. I get that. I think the whole idea that we don't know what that looks like, we do know what it looks like because we've been watching it on all these images that we've been seeing. So I think that it's okay that this film doesn't have to go there because we've been living it already. And I think that's the point of the movie, is that what happened with Emmett Till in 1955 is still going on. We're seeing it happen in live time. So we don't have to see it again in the movie because we've been living it.
I appreciate that perception, that perspective. I think a lot about how almost every Black person has 20 to 25 of these sort of images that you're talking about in our short-term memory that we can call up at any time. I could just start naming names and we would just see the images and we cling to that. And I wonder, what is it doing to us as a community that we're walking around with all these images of Black death that are like in our heads? Like, what do you think that's doing to us?
I think it's traumatizing us. I think depending on who you are, it could either spur you to action or it could make you apathetic. You know, you could feel like, geez, like this has been going on since Black people were brought to these shores. It happened to Emmett Till in 1955. It's happening now, and there's no hope. There's nothing we can do. I think a lot of people feel that way. But I also think there's an equal amount of other people that are pissed as hell and refuse to let it continue. And I'm hoping that those of us like me who are pissed as hell can keep carrying this torch. but I do think that as a Black community, it's putting us in a weird spot where just we don't feel comfortable, we don't feel safe. I think it's making us more suspicious of the people around us. Like I feel like, the guy that who's the parent on your kid's baseball team that you always thought was cool. Now you don't know. Now you're wondering, guy. Like I've been sitting here next to this guy cheering with him for years, and now I don't know. Like, are you like somebody I can trust? I think that's a very common feeling amongst Black people right now, where I think maybe earlier we might not have had those doubts or those suspicions or fears.